the worst thing to do is be silent, do nothing. Because those of us, all of us on this call, and frankly, anyone who's going to be listening to this broadcast here, knows the importance of trade.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
It took forever because the people wanted to take forever.
Well, and to that point, let me also interject here is that for those of you listening, you may be, all right, we're talking right now about an aerospace situation. You think, well, that doesn't really affect me. However, one of the things that the repercussions of that is that, okay, the damage has been done from an aerospace perspective. So then what happens is then added tariffs or restrictions or whatever came up on other commodities. And if I recall, there was on added tariffs and restrictions put on leather goods out of Europe and wine. And a whole, I think chocolates were another thing. So that was one thing there. On the flip side of it, then there was retaliatorial type things on U.S. manufactured medical devices and a few other things. So, I mean, if you are in the industry, this is why it's difficult. You can't learn everything out there, but you got to have your context so that if a question comes up, you know who to go to here and all that. But if I got that right, Larry, is like that's where
you got exactly on here. It's always fascinating when you get to the point, exactly as you say. There's now a WTO order that says, country, either country, any country wins or loses. Whatever country has won, congratulations, you've won. You can now impose sanctioned tariffs, WTO sanctioned tariffs against them, and it's always great to watch how that happens. Because we try to pick on things that are really important to them. So, like Jack Daniel's whiskey, Andy, this is your neck of the woods now. It would be a sanctioned thing, So Jack Daniel's can't be exported as easily around the world here, and we will stop on chocolates because they want to export their chocolate over here. So it's always amusing when we get to that point here, but that once again becomes another process of negotiation here, So it takes a long time, and the naysayers would say that means it's not working. And the other way to look at it, it is working. It's designed to follow rules. We're following the rules, and the parties are, by agreement, keeping this out there. WTO never said on its own, we're just going to wait 6 months or a year to decision. They make their decisions in a relatively timely manner. So the Airbus and Boeing dispute was mostly because they wanted to talk, and talking's good. Now why they talk, how they talk, that's what they're talking about, and whether their talking should hurt other people who are not involved in that dispute. Should Jack Daniels or the chocolatiers in Brussels be hurt because Airbus and Boeing are talking? There's delays here and things like that. But that's a fair point here. Fair point here for sure. The difficulty we have in present time is that the appellate body is not working. It's not working anymore. Largely the U.S. Under Trump, but it was eroding before. You have to have a 3-judge panel of the tribunal, and there's not enough. These people have a limited period of time where they are an appellate judge. I've met appellate judges, and I've had dinner with an appellate judge. I sat next to a guy in Mexico City once, and he was an appellate judge from Mexico. But he was the Mexican appellate judge on the WTO. We had a fascinating dinner, and he did not hold back talking about the U.S. about this. He had a strong opinion about this, but the U.S. has stopped the appointment of the appellate body. So you got to have 3 judges, and you have a problem because a lot of those judges have conflicts. Conflicts of interest are really key. A lot of these people are lawyers who have done international trade law for private parties. Well, they're disqualified. So we need to have a big pool of the judges, a full pool of judges, because some are going to be conflicted out. Right now, we don't have enough judges to handle conflicts, and so now we stop. An example of that was a recent case, and one that would bring to the heart to everyone here. The Trump tariffs went before the WTO. And as I think every trade lawyer in the entire world predicted, the WTO said no. That was in violation of the WTO rules on that we've been holding sound for since 1948. You have no legal basis for that. And I think most attorneys would agree. I don't know if I'd find an attorney who would disagree with that. It violates fundamental precepts of unity. Just a unilateral, you'll pay 25%, you'll pay 10%, you'll pay 82%, but it'll go down 25% if you do this. There's this a wheel and deal type of thing here. So WTO said no. U.S. lost on this and lost very clearly on this. The next day, the secretary, the U.S. Trade Representative, got up there speaking for the Biden administration and said, "Yeah, we're going to stick with this. We didn't agree with Trump when he did it, but now that we're here, we're gonna double down on this. And WTO can't tell us what to do." So we've had two strikes here on this. When the Trump tariffs were established, there was a concern for those of us who practice in the area of trade law because it was based on national security. It's a very good concept of national security on that. Going back to, again, World War II, national security was in everyone's mind. That was paramount. We just finished a world war. We didn't want a third one. So national security was absolutely inherent in everyone's mind. We did not want to have a Germany or a Russia, it might have been feared, doing the same things and starting off in World War III, in which case all this experimentation in trade was off. National security, if you have another world war, this is all off the table. We go back to our normal ways of war. So national security meant a very specific thing there. The Trump tariffs, this is one of my articles on this subject. It's going to be more detail here. Used an existing U.S. law, became known as the Section 232 steel tariffs. There were others as well. 301, we could talk about it as well, but 232, the president said, that's it. National security is involved here, and we are going to have tariffs that would otherwise violate, I think you'd probably even agree, would otherwise violate WTO rules except as national security. And specifically said in his various speeches, our battleships, our aircraft carriers, our military bases all need steel. We need to protect our steel industry. And the Secretary of Defense came out and said, yeah, we got enough steel. The U.S. Quantity of steel production is really enough here, and we have our allies like Canada. Canada is our biggest supplier of steel, and they got enough, and we got enough here. There's no national security problem here. The president then shifted to the thing that put a chill down everyone's spines who do trade law. And he said, by national security, I just mean jobs. We can do this to protect our economy, and there's nothing anyone can do. This arguably, if it is not fixed, it will be the end of world trade law, because everyone can just say our jobs are at stake, and therefore we are going to have national security. It's not national defense like avoidance of World War III. It is jobs in Pennsylvania, which is where he made the announcement. He shifted to the jobs that are here. So WTO looked at that. That's why I want to use that as an example. I look at that and said, no, that's not good. We have specific rules in the WTO what national security means, and just every country protecting its jobs. Every country wants to protect its jobs. So if we allow that liberal use of the word national security, there's no more trade law. Our experiment beginning in 1948 is now over, and just says national security, there's nothing anyone can do about that. USTR came out, articulated that very clearly, that WTO has no authority here. It can go to then the appellate body. The United States somewhat disingenuously has appealed to the appellate body, which it knows is non-existent because we don't let it exist, and we haven't appointed judges to the panel here. So that's where we sort of stand on that right now, on the Trump tariffs. On that, WTO has spoken very clearly on this. It will slowly move toward the process where countries who are aggrieved by that
is one of the things. Now, the tactic that Trump was using at that point is obviously WTO obviously disagreed with it. One of the things going on beyond that, though, is as far as the intent, and lots of different administrations have dealt with this. They've tried traditional ways. Trump obviously was non-conventional, but and now you've got Biden. I don't know what he's doing, but all that to say, with the scenario there is that U.S. goods, all these countries around the world have their goods and they manufacture them, and every one of them wants access to the U.S. market. It's obviously the largest economy in the world, still is at this point, but it's so vast. But when U.S. goods and U.S. companies want to take U.S. goods and go to out, U.S. goods have not been treated fairly for decades in these other countries. It's not been reciprocal. It's like everybody wants U.S. and then when the U.S. goods go out, it's not
Yeah,
reciprocated.
I'd be cautious against that much of a generalization. You can certainly point to individual situations where that is certainly true. We want our cars into China, but they put cars over here, but no, we can't put cars over there. Or there are restrictions on that. We will let you have cars in China, sell cars in China, but you got to give us the patent on this. There's other things that are tied there. Those are fairly good points here. Those should be raised on there.
Well, even for the point, for example, in Europe, a U.S. manufactured car in Europe gets hit with a significant, especially going into Germany, but a significantly higher duty rate than if you reciprocate and it comes back in. A duty rate on a Mercedes coming in here is 3% in the U.S. Going the other way, it's like 25%. Well, wait a minute, and so here's the one thing that I always say.
Hey everyone, we're getting ready for another annual ICPA event coming up the week of March 12th in Orlando, Florida. If you have been thinking of attending any of the ICPA conferences, this is the one you should not miss. There will be more sessions than any other conference, with a guaranteed sellout, so hurry and get your tickets today. We are also excited to share that Simply Trade podcast will be in attendance, and we want you to be part of our show. Listen to episodes 14, 15, and 16 to find out why you can't miss this conference.
Governments will utilize the different trade groups, trade agreements, the WTO, the different entities, and whether it's right or wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to take a stand one way. I'm just looking at it from a standpoint of we need to be able to compete country to country on cost, on cycle times, and imports, exports, the whole 9 yards. So when it goes back and forth. And that's one of the things I think that was coming up is that U.S. goods have not been treated fairly. And so then something needs to be done about it. Well, no matter what's done, somebody's going to holler and scream about it.
The question is, and from a legal perspective, we have a rules-based approach or a unilateral approach. And we have done unilateral approaches before. So Trump did a strong unilateral approach. I am the president. I will do this. And he will adjust it and use it as a bargaining chip. I will 25% across the board, but 10% for you. If you give us this in the USMCA agreement, we'll reduce that. It was and he does do deals, and that's what he did. He writes a book about it. He makes deals, and this was a deal-based approach here. I travel a great deal overseas and see how that comes across overseas. And I can say there's some resentment to that approach here. You have the President of the United States saying England or the UK is an enemy of the United States because they're a threat to our national security. I don't know if that's an entirely accurate statement here. So they're offended by that. What does that do to our allies there on that? But you raise good points there. I mean, we have a rules-based system. And if someone is not playing by those rules, they have to face the consequences of that. There has to be a consequence for that. And the consequence of that is to go to the WTO. Your choices are alternatively no rules-based. Anything goes. No rules at all. And we've done that before. So I'll give you one new development, though, that's giving some promise here. And this is out of the fact that the WTO appellate body is not working here. Under Article 25 of the WTO rules, Alternative Dispute Resolution, we started international trade arbitrations. Something new. Always been in the rule, but no one's ever done it because there would never need to do it. We had an appellate body that would pass laws and that would work, or pass the rules that were there. So there's a new thing called the Multi-Party Interim Appeal Arrangement. Multi-Party Interim Appeal Arrangement, or MPIA. And basically it is arbitration in lieu of the appellate body work. Fascinating thing. There's been a few of those already here. It is by agreement. You can't force someone to arbitrate here, but if you have no choice but to arbitrate because the appellate body is defunct, you now have an appellate body. And I've read some of the decisions on that, and people win and lose in all of these things. Most of the part, the appellate body, the arbitration groups have upheld WTO. So you're not likely to win, at least historically here. But there is an opportunity here just to use arbitration. They don't use the word binding arbitrations, but since it's the only arbitration you get, it's sort of binding. That's it. That's all you can do here. So the countries are before them, and it is like an it is like the WTO appellate body resolution, but it has some improvements here. It's not bound by the same rules. They use arbitration rules. They will have preliminary meetings to the hearings to discuss the dispute, try to work it out like any good arbitrator would do. Try to identify where the dispute is, where it could work out. It is shorter and in some ways more fair in the sense that everyone gets to be heard on these things here. So it's way too early to draw any conclusions about this, but it has started already.
All right, and with that type of arbitration under the, I guess, the WTO scenario there, that would be government to government. Is that right?
Well, the governments are before them. You're right, and the MPIA makes the decision here. Now that is pursuant to Article 25 of the WTO. So that is now a WTO enforceable event. Now we haven't got that far where the WTO comes back in to enforce the arbitration through mutual sanctions or anything like that. We're not there yet. It's just an interesting thing to watch. It's very new. I mean, sure, this is something that's in in the last year or so.
Is that like also with reference to like what we hear, what used to be NAFTA arbitration and USMCA now? Like that's what you mean by alternate arbitrations as well, correct?
It's the same concept, a little bit different. A NAFTA arbitration is pursuant only to the NAFTA rules.
Right. No, exactly.
But
yes.
you're right. But the concept is the same. There's a party will arbitrate and bring the dispute to an arbitrator or a panel of arbitrators rather than established judges here. Same concept. Same concept.
And the idea of trying to get agreement on who's going to be the arbitrator is going to be, I'm sure, a fun discussion. But to that point, here's where one of the things I was going though is that you've got, it would be the maybe the Department of Commerce or the State Department to be involved in whatever in different governments as they're talking through that. Then at a more of a business level, people that are out there, if you've got a dispute in some kind of a scenario like that, I know the International Chamber of Commerce, or ICC, has an arbitration function. And so that works really well. But that's at the company or individual level versus the country or government level.
Yeah, it is private versus public arbitration. The private is the ICC, well established, decades and decades. And it's I am not an arbitrator, but I know people who do this. This is a legal profession. And the good thing about arbitration is, unlike litigation is more cutthroat. Arbitrators really try to find the middle ground. I mean, whether that's good or bad, maybe you don't want the middle ground, but I mean, the point is there is much more attempt to resolve things amicably, where everyone is equally unhappy at the end, and then move on with their lives.
Yeah,
so,
I love that. Equally unhappy.
The arbitrator is happy when they go back; they're both grumbling the same amount. That's a good thing. So it's something to watch here. I'd like to see the rule of law. I'm a lawyer, so I mean, rule of law is everything. I just know where the world is without rule of law. So the law is imperfect. I've been practicing 36 years, and I can tell you it's imperfect for sure. And what trade law is different than that. It's imperfect in many respects. The alternative is no law, or a very weak law, and that doesn't work for everyone either. So my pitch for the rule of law, as a lawyer would have to do in these cases here. But bottom line is, as we close this up here, this is a great topic everyone should watch, and so I really appreciate the opportunity to share the history, because people read. I cannot stand to any news. There's no good news on trade in the sense of, when I say good news, in the sense of well researched, thoughtful news on these things here. It's only this happened here, and they have a very very basic knowledge that only comes from talking heads on television. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the history of trade and where that predicts or where we might go in the future, good, bad, or ugly.
Well, one of the things that I would like to get your comments on is for people that are in the industry here, and I'm talking more from not only a international trade, maybe you're in the corporate legal side of things, you may be in the compliance arena and government affairs and those kinds of things. But with these kinds of issues that come up, it is important to get involved and stay involved in different facets of trade associations so that you can try and stay current with at least your particular industry, as well as networking so that it's like, okay, I'm in pharmaceuticals, or I'm in, let's say garment manufacturing. We'll use fashion because that's always a topic there. And something's come up and I can reach out to somebody that may be in medical devices of some kind and say, look, this issue's coming up. There's supposedly repercussions. It's in the medical device industry. I don't know about, can you help me out and bring it up to speed? So networking, as well as getting involved in trade associations to push your agenda or try and influence, having the association influence lawmakers and different things of that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I would add to that, there are two purposes of trade association. One is exactly as you say, influence, and make sure that those who really understand trade, those of us who are in the industry, who spent their lives in the industry, understand the importance of trade to world peace, to eradication of world poverty, to equal rights. I mean, there's so many things that are benefited by trade here. But other trade associations are very much about education, being kept abreast of these things here, just purely education. So even if you're not going to hire a lobbyist, but you're educated, you come together to learn from each other. So there's a great, we're very fortunate in this country that for a relatively modest amount of money, there are trade groups that you can join and learn from. Others that you can join and lend your voice to congressional interests or things like that. The worst thing to do is be silent, do nothing, because all of us on this call, and frankly, anyone who's going to be listening to this broadcast here knows the importance of trade. They are not going to be the people who have their heads in the sand saying all trade is bad. They see the promise of trade, but they got to be honest about the negative sides of trade as well. It does not always work smoothly. We shouldn't pretend that it does, but we try to make it work a little bit better, and we're all better because of that. It's a good thing. So, but I do agree.
I have spent a lot of my career helping, different businesses stimulate trade, and help businesses break into a particular market, and how to export the goods or import them in from one country to another, and then the distribution and the things of that nature. All of that was when you're stimulating international trade, it's a positive. From one culture to another, exchange of monetary funds, obviously, and all of that. That's great. The scenario there is when you've got that, now you've got, if you will, business entities that are involved, because when it comes down to it, yeah, government to government's one issue, but it comes down to people. And you said it earlier, even in the aerospace, if they're talking, if the governments are talking and people are talking, key is it's people. So, when we're stimulating trade, good, bad, or indifferent, it's like we've got to be communicating with each other and talking with it. And that's just one of the entities that are one of the aspects that we need to be pushing for, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great promise of trade there. You travel internationally and you see the good and bad of trade. You see abject poverty around the world, and you hope that trade will help them or something will help them. This trade is only one thing. Going back to the end of World War II, you had other things: the Bretton Woods Agreement. You had International Monetary Fund, World Bank. You have private equivalents of that. China does a serious amount of banking that would rival the IMF these days. The point is that how we govern our financial relationships is really critical here. And in terms of priorities here, you want to have trade, but you want to make sure it's good, responsible, intelligent trade. Good example of that, I think, is the as fully approved by the WTO. We have a framework for doing these things. We have as you know well, Andy, and I love the forced labor issue there.
The Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, yeah.
And the
It's
expansion.
anti-slavery.
Yeah. It's good to you look at these kind of things here. Well, these are trade rules. China cannot be motivated to use slavery if they want to join the world market. They have to follow certain rules, and if they don't, there's consequences here. So I like this in the sense of you don't have to go to the WTO about this. You pass a rule that says, pursuant to the WTO is certainly against slavery. If China wants to go to the WTO and say our restrictions are wrong, there's no slavery here, good luck with that. Let them try to do that. They're not doing that. They're not going to the WTO. I think they talked about defending of their slavery here. They went from the there's no slavery in China to well, we maybe have some slavery, but it's none of your business approach.
Yeah, that's where I guess I have the issue is where the WTO is failing. They go in there and there seems to me, now again, maybe I'm biased, but there seems to be always an opportunity where the WTO seems to want to just beat up on the U.S. And it's like, well, no, wait a minute. Look over here at China and what they're doing. Look at what Russia's doing. Come back over and at one point, for example, what Brazil was doing. People will talk about it. If you try and do business down in Brazil, Brazil keeps changing their rules and it makes it difficult. It's like, well, no, wait a minute. Stop for a minute. Hence, I will say there was criticism at the time, but Trump basically pulled them out of GSP or the trade department there and all that. It's like, because, they were not reciprocated. They kept putting additional rules on U.S. goods going in there. They got pulled out of GSP. Guess what? All of a sudden, Brazil came back around and said, okay, no. We'll adhere to that GSP agreement. Same thing in Argentina. There's another one. Argentina is one, sets up barriers, and it was really more barriers to other countries around the world than the U.S. But, I mean, again, it's like, WTO, where are you? You're not saying anything here.
No. It's a decent point. I mean, protectionism is a natural instinct. People want to protect things here, and so they naturally, especially those who are not well versed in trade, will think all we got to do is be protectionist. But protectionist has two sides. If Brazil is protectionist, and you're right, they certainly are. Doing business in Brazil is more challenging than Chile. Chile is more open for these things. Argentina is probably better than Brazil as well. But yeah, Brazil is protectionist, and it makes it hard for U.S. businesses to go in there. And so we pull out of GSP, but it's a good example when you have GSP to be pulled out of. You have trade relationships which are leverage, and trade relationships and leverage are a good thing. Under the WTO rules, the Uyghur sanctions that we apply under domestic legislation work. I think they were going to work. Maybe it's too early to see if they're working yet here, but China wants to be able to join the world and be the leader in the world and all these things here. And WTO can say to China, if you want to do this, you got to follow these rules. And everyone would agree with you, Andy, that China hasn't always followed all those rules here. I'm not sure I'd agree that the U.S. loses these. We win most of our WTO cases. I mean, those are just fact. We win. We're good at it. I think it's because we have the best lawyers, but we win a lot of those. The Uyghur situation is a very good one here. We have leverage. China wants to sell here. They want to sell cotton here. They want to sell shoes here that are made of cotton here. And so U.S. law, again, all approved by WTO, doesn't violate WTO, it would be WTO sanctioned here, passes rules that say, you can't import here. Flat no. And what that has done is it's changed the law. And it's a good change, hard change sometimes. It's not just I'm importing cotton, I'm importing the Nike shoes. And Nike then has to check out their entire supply chain to make sure that it is not slavery anywhere in the supply chain here. This is an example where trade restrictions are working. I think it's good. I think it's good to have here. I would rather have us really fight over cotton, slavery, and things like that than having spy balloons going over our country.
Yeah, and military actions. I mean, I'm right there with you. Even if we don't agree, if people are debating a trade policy of some kind, at least they're talking. So that's key in all of that. But one thing, again, wrapping this up, I guess we need to come back around on some things. One of the things I think, like you just said, is with the trade associations, both staying up to speed, providing influence, and in education, not only on those topics. The other thing is, I would challenge our listeners: you need to get yourself and your staff trained, even on basic functionality. How to properly classify, how to handle certain things, how to even get proficient with Microsoft Office and those things. Why am I saying that? Because it will make you more productive. With that improved productivity, it gives you some time now you can spend and actually apply your expertise into literally reading the documents that's in articles such as what Larry's got or anybody else. You may not agree with even the article, but you need to understand, what are the points? What's somebody looking at? If I don't have a dog in the hunt kind of thing, I need to know what are the facts here so I can try and make my own decision, because you need to be able to communicate up your chain to be able to say, hey, here is this particular issue, and these are the pros of it. Here are the cons. It's my opinion that we should go this way. Or if you don't have an opinion, but you need to have your executive management be able to make a decision, say which direction do you want to go. You've got to give them the facts. That means you got to educate yourself, and that's where you network in the industry.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Education is really the key here. Good, responsible trade people are educated, understand the ethics of trade, the rules of trade, the documents of trade, all these things. If you are not educated, you are very fooled by the manipulators. There are people who get up there and say, here's a fact on trade. And every trade lawyer and every trade practitioner says that is nowhere close to the truth. But if you don't know the difference between the truth and because you have not educated yourself on those things, you can easily fall victim to those who will distort trade, who will just lie about it.
Well, Larry, I greatly appreciate this. Has been a great, man. I'll tell you what, I love talking with you, man. You are just a wealth of information. It's always a pleasure to get to talk with you.
Well, good. Appreciate the opportunity. It's my favorite topic to talk about, and so I hope it's helpful. And people can get a hold of me and want to talk about it some more. I got 3 articles on the stuff on LinkedIn. They can look at that or something to talk. And like you say, I'll probably see you at some conference here. So.
Well, definitely, and we're going to be doing some follow-up on this one. I think it'll be interesting, especially when the development of some of the spy balloons and whatever these other is like. Okay, what countries are involved? Whatever, does that impact trade? We may do a follow-up with that. So,
yeah, definitely.
Lalo, what do you think, buddy?
Well, thank you. No, well, this was a very interesting conversation. I mean, it's we really dug in there with a lot of details, and just so that everybody knows, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you got a condensed version of it. If you want to listen for the entire thing, because we're at about an hour here, please do look for it in on video format. Just check the show notes on where to go and watch the full length, because this is definitely something that you do need to know about. Yeah, exactly. That you'll always reference to. You're right. I mean, Larry just talked about being educated. This is one form of getting yourself educated on this, and just know what's going on so that you can, even to your own management team, right, Andy? We've been talking a lot about that. Talk to them and at least give them at least a good sense of what how that affects trade, even for you internally. So.
Well, one of the things that comes into play is executives, especially a larger company, are going to be, rubbing elbows with a lot of high-level government officials usually. At some point, you want to make sure that your government, your executives have talking points on whatever it is. Don't try and brief them on everything under the sun. Give them some good talking points, but you've got to know your business and be prepared so that you can empower your leadership with the talking points. So, all right, folks, this has been a good show. To those listening again, we thank you so much. Please like this, share it, talk about it, give us some feedback. If there's things you like, don't like, whatever, let us know, and we'll take your feedback to heart. So with that, I guess we need to bid everybody a good day.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Larry. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.